You ever hand someone a gift so big it could change their life, only to watch them throw it away like a used napkin? Yeah, that's where this all started. My name's Tyler, I'm 33, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of guy who keeps his head down, does the work, and tries to stay out of the family drama. But it turns out, even if you avoid the fire, it'll find a way to burn you if you're standing close enough. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, not the golden child. Oh no, that title belonged to my younger brother, Chase. 2 years my junior and 10 times louder. Chase has always had a magnetic pull. People either loved him or hated him. There was no in between. He could sweet-talk his way out of any mess, and somehow spin things so that even when he was dead wrong, he still walked away like he won. My parents? They ate it up. Especially Mom. She always had a soft spot for him, like he was this fragile little bird who needed constant praise and protection. Dad was more even-keeled, but over time, even he seemed to start buying into the narrative that Chase was just going through a phase every time he messed up. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. I got decent grades, worked part-time through college, and eventually built a digital marketing business from scratch in my late 20s. Nothing flashy, but successful. I don't post about it. I don't flaunt it. Most people in my life barely understand what I do, including my family, but they knew I was doing well. That was enough for them to feel vaguely proud, but not curious enough to ask for details. And I was fine with that, until it wasn't. See, about a year and a half ago, I came into a little unexpected windfall. My company landed a contract with a major brand, one of those once-in-a-career deals that came out of nowhere but changed everything. Overnight, I went from comfortable to wealthy. Not billionaire wealthy, not private jet wealthy, but comfortable enough that I could finally start giving back in the way I always wanted to. That's when I had the idea I'd buy a lake house. Not for me, but for my parents. A retirement gift. Something to thank them for all the sacrifices they made when we were growing up, especially Dad, who worked double shifts at the plant for years just to keep us in school clothes and cereal. They weren't perfect parents by any stretch, but they were good people who'd always put family first. Or at least, that's what I believed. The house was beautiful. A 3-bedroom cedar-paneled home on Lake Weller, with a private dock, wraparound porch, and views that looked like a Bob Ross painting come to life. It was a foreclosure deal I'd found through a contact, $500,000, well below market for the area, and it only needed light renovations. I bought it outright, no mortgage. My name was on the deed. I didn't even think twice. At first, my parents were floored. I told them it was theirs to live in for as long as they wanted. No rent, no strings. I'd pay for property taxes and upkeep. All they had to do was enjoy it. They moved in last spring, right after Dad finally retired for good. They were glowing. Mom said it felt like a dream. Dad, usually so stoic, actually teared up. We took photos on the dock, grilled hot dogs that night, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd done something that made them truly proud of me. Then Chase showed up. I remember the first visit like a glitch in a video game. Chase pulled up unannounced in his blacked-out Jeep, blasting some EDM song, wearing a tank top and cargo shorts like he was auditioning for a low-budget reality show. His wife, Sabrina, hopped out of the passenger side with a little yappy dog tucked in her designer purse and a pair of sunglasses so oversized she looked like a cartoon. They hugged Mom and Dad, waved at me like I was the Uber driver, and proceeded to tour the house like it was a free Airbnb stay. Chase was all smiles. Bro, this place is sick. You serious? You bought this for them. He clapped me on the back like I'd won a carnival prize. Sabrina gave a little whistle and said, wow, lake view and everything? You really do have money. The way she said it, it wasn't admiration. It was calculation. Like she was taking inventory of the drapes and granite countertops. They stayed the weekend. Without asking. Took the master bedroom, too. Mom offered them the guest room, but Chase said, nah, I can't sleep in a twin bed like I'm back in middle school. I expected my parents to shut that down, but they just laughed it off. Said they didn't mind. That was the first red flag. After that weekend, I noticed small things start to shift. My parents stopped calling me as much. When I did talk to them, they seemed distracted. I figured they were just busy adjusting to retirement life, maybe overwhelmed by the move. Then Chase started posting pictures on Instagram of himself, chilling at the lake house, like it was his personal getaway. One picture had the caption, Lake Life. Earn not given. That one stung more than I wanted to admit. Still, I let it go. I told myself I didn't give them the house to get praise. I gave it because it was the right thing to do. But that feeling, that creeping sense that something was off, kept scratching at the back of my skull. It wasn't until 3 months later, when I drove up to surprise them for Dad's birthday, that I realized just how wrong everything had gone. I arrived around 8 p.m. It was late September, cool breeze in the air, leaves starting to turn. I parked my car down the hill and walked up to the house quietly, excited to see their faces. I had a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch in one hand and a new fishing rod in the other. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I knocked. Still nothing. After a minute, I circled around to the back porch. Maybe they were sitting by the fire pit. But the lights were off. Curtains drawn. Everything felt cold. Abandoned. I pulled out my phone and called Mom. She answered on the first ring, voice hushed. Tyler. Hey, I said. I'm out back. Where are you guys? She paused. We're in the garage. The garage. I blinked. Why? She hesitated again. It's complicated. Please don't make a scene. Those 4 words. Please don't make a scene. That's when my stomach dropped. I walked to the side of the house and opened the garage door. There they were. My mom and dad. In lawn chairs. Surrounded by boxes and old quilts. A space heater buzzing in the corner. My dad's fishing gear piled in a corner like it hadn't been touched in weeks. A single lamp lit the space, casting long, sad shadows across their hunched silhouettes. And that's when I asked the question that changed everything. What is going on? Mom looked up at me, her eyes glassy. She opened her mouth to answer. But behind me, I heard a voice say, You're not supposed to be here. I turned, and there was Chase, standing in the doorway, shirtless, smirking, holding a beer. That's where things really began to spiral. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at Chase, the cold garage light reflecting off the bottle in his hand like it was mocking me. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. The smell of dust, oil, and mildew lingered in the air. My mom, bless her heart, tried to force a smile like this was normal. Like this, them sleeping in a garage in their own retirement home, was fine. Chase, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level. Why are Mom and Dad out here? He rolled his eyes and leaned against the doorframe like he was settling in for some petty argument he had no intention of losing. Don't start with that tone, man. You didn't call ahead. You're showing up unannounced and barging in like you still run the place. I do run the place, I shot back. I own it. He chuckled. Actually chuckled. Yeah, sure, technically. But I'm the one taking care of things now. Fixing stuff, maintaining the place. Paying utilities when they forget. You'd be surprised how fast that adds up. You kicked them out of their own house, I said, incredulous. They're your parents. His smirk didn't budge. They're our parents. And they said they didn't mind. Right, Mom? He didn't even look at her. Just tossed the question over his shoulder like a bone to a dog. My mom flinched. It's temporary. We didn't want to cause a fuss. Cause a fuss. I repeated. You're living in a garage. Dad hadn't said a word. He just sat there, eyes glued to the concrete floor, jaw clenched like it physically pained him to be seen like this. That hurt more than anything Chase could have said. My dad, who worked 35 years without complaint, who never asked for much, reduced to sleeping in a lawn chair like some squatter in his own home. All while my freeloading brother played king of the castle. I turned back to Chase. Get out. Tonight. He stepped forward, suddenly serious. I don't think you understand the situation. No, I said, cutting him off. I don't think you understand. You're squatting in a house I gave to our parents. This was never yours. You don't have a say. I do now, he said coolly. You should check the deed. Something in my gut twisted. I froze. What? Oh yeah, he said, swaying slightly as he took another sip of beer. Had it updated a few months back. Got Mom and Dad to sign over some things. You know how they are with paperwork. We trust you, Chase. You're the only one who visits. Blah, blah, blah. He smiled, teeth flashing. Long story short, it's mine now. My mom gasped. You said it was just to help with taxes. Chase waved her off. Relax. I was going to tell you. Eventually. You forged their signatures, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. I just knew. Prove it, he said, and for a moment, just a flicker, I saw something behind his eyes. Fear? No, not quite. More like calculation. He'd planned this. He wanted me to react. Wanted to drag me into a fight and make me look like the bad guy. Then came the final insult. Sabrina appeared behind him, barefoot and wrapped in one of Mom's old knitted blankets like she owned the place. She took one look at my parents in the garage and snorted. "Oh my God, are they still out here?" she said, laughing. "I thought you said they went to a hotel." Chase shrugged. "They're fine." Sabrina turned to my mom and said with a syrupy grin, "Honestly, you're lucky we let you stay at all. Most people your age end up in, like, those sad nursing homes." That was it. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. I took a step forward, but Chase held up a hand like he was a crossing guard. "Careful," he said. "You raise your voice or touch me, and I'll call the cops. Harassment, trespassing, whatever fits." The worst part? He could probably make it stick, at least for the night. I turned back to my parents. "Pack a bag," I said quietly. "You're coming with me." My dad still hadn't moved, but I saw a twitch in his jaw. Anger, maybe shame, maybe both. He looked like a man who'd lost everything and was trying to decide if he deserved to get it back. "I'll drive," I told them. "We'll talk later." They didn't argue. We left that night without saying another word to Chase or Sabrina. I didn't trust myself to speak. I was shaking from the inside out, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles hurt. As we pulled away from the Lakehouse, my Lakehouse, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time and saw Chase standing on the porch with his arm around Sabrina, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. That night, I put my parents up in a hotel suite downtown, the kind with a kitchenette and a real bed. Mom cried when she saw it, said she didn't deserve it. Dad just nodded once and sat on the edge of the bed like he wasn't sure it was real. I didn't press them for details, not yet. But I stayed up most of the night, pacing the hallway, staring out the window, and turning one question over and over in my head. How did I let this happen? Over the next week, the full picture came into focus. Slowly, painfully. Turns out Chase had been planting seeds for months, maybe even years. Visiting more often, offering to help with bills, telling our parents I was too busy to care, that I only bought the house for show, that he was the one who'd really take care of them. He even offered to handle the boring stuff, mail, taxes, repairs, so they could enjoy retirement without the stress. Then came the paperwork. He said it was just to streamline things. Mom said one afternoon, her hands trembling around a cup of tea. Something about simplifying ownership for tax breaks. Dad hadn't read the documents closely. His eyesight had been failing. Mom trusted Chase. They both did. They signed. "I should have known," she whispered. "He was so pushy about it. I didn't want to upset him." That line stuck with me. Didn't want to upset him. That's what it always came back to with Chase. He was like a storm. You didn't confront him, you endured him. You waited for him to pass, hoping the damage wouldn't be too bad. But this time, he'd burned the whole village down. Meanwhile, Chase wasted no time rubbing salt in the wound. He posted videos of himself renovating his lake house, ripping out Mom's garden, turning Dad's den into a gaming room, painting the porch in gaudy colors like he was a house flipper on a budget cable network. He even gave Sabrina's dog its own bedroom. No joke. Full bed, tiny dresser, nameplate on the door, princess suite. I watched every post like a car crash. Morbid curiosity, rage, guilt. I thought about going to the cops, about lawyers. But the truth is, proving forged documents isn't easy, especially when the supposed victims signed willingly. And Chase had always been good at covering his tracks. So I did what I always do when things get bad. I got quiet. I started planning. I didn't tell my parents what I was working on. I didn't post online. I didn't call Chase. I just listened, asked questions, gathered receipts, watched his online activity like a hawk. Because here's the thing Chase never understood. I wasn't just the quiet one. I was the patient one. The one who didn't show his hand until the game was already over. And this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For weeks after moving my parents into the hotel, I walked around with a quiet storm inside me. I'd never felt rage like that. White hot and cold at the same time. Like my blood had turned to ice, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. Every day was a test of restraint. Every morning, I'd scroll Chase's socials, see him flexing in my lake house, standing in front of the fireplace I picked out, grinning like a conqueror who'd stolen his kingdom, and I'd have to stop myself from driving back there and pounding on the door until someone called the cops. But rage without action is just poison, and I could feel it eating at me. The worst part wasn't even the theft. It wasn't even the betrayal or the lies. It was the way he humiliated our parents. These people who gave him everything, who forgave him over and over again, and he threw them in the garage like they were leftovers he didn't want to toss, but couldn't be bothered to put in the fridge. And they, God love them, they still defended him. Not openly, not anymore, but in little ways. Mom would say things like, he wasn't always like this, or he just needs help. And every time she did, I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep down, I got it. They didn't want to believe their youngest son was capable of something so vile. They didn't want their last chapter to be marked by a betrayal so sharp it split their family down the middle. And I didn't want that either. But we were already past that point. Still, I let them grieve. I didn't push them. I focused on building something new. Something better. First thing I did was move them out of the hotel and into a short-term rental apartment. Clean, bright, furnished, quiet. It cost more than I'd planned, but I didn't care. It gave them dignity again. A door that locked. A couch that didn't creak. A fridge with food they didn't have to label. The kind of basics Chase had ripped away like he was trimming fat from a budget. Mom cried the first night there. I pretended not to see. Just turned on the TV and pretended I was invested in some home improvement show neither of us were watching. Then I got to work. I started meeting with lawyers, quietly. No announcements, no Facebook status, no angry texts to Chase. I didn't want him to see me coming. And I knew that if I came at him too soon, he'd just lawyer up, hide the paperwork, vanish into the legal fog like he always did. But I had something this time I'd never had before, leverage. Actual, provable leverage. See, Chase had always been sloppy with his ego. He couldn't help himself. He had to brag. And social media was his playground. He posted everything. The fake renovations, the investment strategies, even screenshots of his Venmo transactions when people paid rent to stay at his Lakehouse Airbnb. That's right. He'd turned it into a business. At first, I was shocked. Then I realized it was perfect. Because now it wasn't just fraud. It was tax fraud, housing code violations, illegal rental operations on residential zone property. And he was dumb enough to document it all publicly, like he was auditioning for the world's worst reality show. I started screen recording everything. Every post, every story, every comment where he replied, "Yeah man, my parents don't even live here anymore." I took it over. Every time he tagged a fake business account that linked back to a Cash App under his name. It was all digital breadcrumbs, and I followed every one. Meanwhile, I helped my parents rebuild their lives, piece by piece. I got Dad set up with a part-time fishing club downtown. Nothing big, just something to get him out of the house and back into the world. He didn't talk much those days, but I could see him slowly defrosting, bit by bit, like ice breaking up on a frozen pond. Mom started volunteering at the library. She shelved books, helped kids with reading hour, made friends with the other retirees. Every week, she seemed to stand a little straighter, laugh a little more. They never asked about Chase. Not once. And I didn't bring him up. It was like we were all trying to scrub him from our systems without saying the words. But behind the scenes, I was still planning. And the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Turns out, Chase wasn't just scamming our parents. He was scamming everyone. His whole Lakehouse rental empire was a lie propped up by doctored photos, fake reviews, and double bookings. I found a Reddit thread, no joke, where people were warning each other about a sketchy lake rental run by some shirtless guy who lives there full-time and keeps hitting on guest girlfriends. Someone else posted a screenshot of their DMs with Chase where he refused to refund them after canceling last minute, saying, "Sorry bro, family emergency. Can't help it. Blame the universe." Classy. I compiled everything, screenshots, guest complaints, legal docs, zoning codes, even a video someone posted of Chase getting into a shouting match with a neighbor over parking. I handed it all over to a real estate lawyer named Carter, a friend of a friend, the kind of guy who spoke softly and carried a sledgehammer in the form of legal precedent. "This is good," Carter said after reviewing the case file. "Really good." I told him I wanted everything done quietly. No scorched earth. No nuclear press. Just precision. I wanted the Lakehouse back. I wanted the deed. I wanted Chase out. Not screaming, not suing, just gone. But Carter leaned back in his chair and said something I didn't expect. "You could do that, but it wouldn't solve the problem." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He'll find another mark," Carter said. "Maybe not your parents. Maybe not you. But someone else. That's what people like your brother do. This house. It's just a symptom. If you want to stop the disease, you have to go deeper. He was right. And that's when the real plan began. I reached out to a few people I knew from the startup scene, people who'd been burned by bad deals, fake gurus, crypto scammers. I told them I had a project, a documentary, a cautionary tale about family fraud and entitlement. I didn't mention names, just said I had receipts. They were in. One guy offered editing. Another had a podcast. A third connected me to a woman who ran a YouTube channel about real estate scams and fake Airbnb horror stories. She loved the angle, said it could go viral, said people needed to hear stories like this because it wasn't just about a house. It was about family and how trust can be twisted into a weapon. All I needed was a little more time. I knew Chase was planning a big event at the Lakehouse, some 4th of July bash he was hyping online with invites, flyers, even a DJ. He was calling it Chase's Freedom Fest, which was hilarious considering how much freedom he'd stolen to make it happen. He had no idea I was watching, that I had people ready to show up, that the entire house of cards he'd built was about to collapse. But I wasn't going to make my move yet, not until everything was airtight. So I waited. And as I waited, something strange happened. I started to breathe again. Not just the shallow breaths I'd been taking since the garage moment, but real breaths. Deep ones. The kind that hit your chest like fresh air after a thunderstorm. I started running again in the mornings. Not far, but enough to sweat. Enough to feel my feet on the ground. I signed up for a local mentorship group and began coaching a few young entrepreneurs who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Hungry, anxious, trying to make something real. One of them told me I had calm boss energy. I'd never been called that before. It felt good. Even my apartment, once just a place to sleep, started to feel like a home. I added plants. Art. I cooked again. Nothing fancy. Just meals that reminded me I was still human. Still whole. And the calls with mom and dad changed, too. They weren't just check-ins anymore. They were actual conversations. We talked about books, old movies, recipes. They started calling me first, asking about my life. Not Chase. Not the Lakehouse. Me. It felt like, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just their responsible son. I was Tyler, a person they respected, admired, trusted. And the best part? Chase had no clue. He still thought I was sulking in silence. Still thought he'd won. He kept posting, kept bragging, kept playing king of a castle he built on stolen sand. But what he didn't realize was that the tide was coming. And this time, I wasn't just going to take back the house. I was going to take back everything. Chase always believed the world was his game board, and the rest of us were just NPCs, side characters meant to serve his storyline. If he was the hero in his mind, then I was the boring older brother who stayed off-screen. The guy who showed up only when it was convenient for Chase's narrative. And that suited me fine for a long time. But now the story was mine. By mid-June, the storm had gathered. Quietly, thoroughly. I had documents, testimonies, screenshots, and legal affidavits lined up like dominoes. My lawyer, Carter, worked faster than I expected, pulling title records, checking for notary fraud, interviewing neighbors who had no problem recounting stories of Chase's temper tantrums and late-night parties. One neighbor, a retired veteran named Joe, emailed us a folder full of photos he'd been taking since March. I guess the guy had been trying to document the chaos to send to the HOA board. The photos included loud parties, bonfires that got dangerously close to the tree line, and even one shot of Sabrina letting her dog poop on Joe's front steps, without cleaning it up. Classy as ever. One gem of a video showed Chase drunkenly arguing with someone over a missing speaker and yelling, "This is my house, my rules. If you don't like it, get the heck off my dock." Carter chuckled when he saw that one. "This is gold," he said. "Even if we didn't have the forgery angle, this would be enough to trigger a dozen violations." But it was the forgery that was the real key. We'd managed to get our hands on the notarized documents Chase had helped my parents sign, transferring limited ownership of the Lakehouse to a vague trust with Chase listed as the acting trustee. At first glance, it seemed semi-legit, if not sleazy. But Carter's team found the notary's signature didn't match her state records. Worse, when we called the notary's office, they had no record of that transaction ever happening. That's when it clicked. Chase had forged the signature. He hadn't just manipulated our parents. He'd outright fabricated a legal document to claim ownership of the house. It was the smoking gun we'd been waiting for. Still, I didn't want to rush in. I wanted the timing to be perfect. I needed a moment so public, so brazen, that exposing him would feel like snapping a spotlight on a roach scurrying across a white floor. And right on cue, Chase gave it to me. Freedom Fest 2K25, he posted on Instagram, complete with a glitchy promo video made in some cheap online editor. Fireworks overlays, neon text, a hype soundtrack that made me cringe. Come party with me at the sickest Lakehouse in the state. DJs, food trucks, paddleboard races, drone shows, 3 days of chaos on Lake Weller. He even sold tickets. Tickets. He was charging strangers to attend a rager on property he didn't legally own. I stared at that post for a long time, barely breathing. Not with rage. No, that had passed. This was something else. Something sharper. Clarity. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. He was handing me the sword, still bragging about how invincible he was. I looked up from my laptop, smirked, and said to myself, game on. The next week was a blur of motion. I booked a meeting with the county clerk to start the official proceedings to revoke the deed transfer based on fraud and forgery. I gave Carter permission to start drafting a cease and desist order regarding the illegal rentals and events. I filed a quiet title lawsuit, essentially asking the court to clarify ownership due to forged documentation. But I still wasn't done. See, I didn't just want the house back. I wanted everyone to see what he did. I wanted him to feel the humiliation he'd never once experienced in his golden boy life. And I wanted it to unfold slowly, publicly, the kind of thing that would linger in his shadow for years. So I made a few more calls. First, I reached out to a freelance journalist I knew, Madison. We'd worked together years ago on a startup feature, and she'd since grown her own audience covering consumer fraud and real estate scams. Her channel had nearly 300,000 followers, and she was known for making deep dive videos that often went viral. I sent her a sample of the story, just a teaser. Within an hour, she called me. Are you kidding me? She said. This is insane. You're telling me your brother stole your parents' house and turned it into a fake luxury rental scam. I'm telling you, I replied. That's just the beginning. She wanted it. Badly. But I asked her to hold off on releasing anything until after Freedom Fest. I told her I'd give her full access to the documents, testimonies, and video evidence after the storm hit. Next, I called Brendan, one of the guys from the startup mentorship group. Young, ambitious, and deadly with a drone. I asked if he wanted to help document a real-life downfall. He said, say less. I'm in. Finally, I made one last call. My cousin, Natalie. She was a paralegal and also, importantly, very close to Mom. Natalie had always seen through Chase's crap, but kept her distance to keep peace in the family. I told her everything. I mean everything. She didn't even hesitate. Whatever you need, she said. Let's bury him. By July 2nd, the plan was locked in. My parents still didn't know everything. I told them I was handling things, but left out the details. I didn't want them worrying. I didn't want them talking. Not yet. Freedom Fest began on Friday, July 4th. I didn't show up that day. Instead, I watched. Brendan flew a drone overhead from the public park across the lake and filmed everything. The crowd of partygoers lining up at the makeshift gates, the giant inflatable floats covering the water, the food trucks blocking the road. Chase strutted around shirtless with a walkie-talkie clipped to his cargo shorts, barking orders like a low-rent event manager. He even had a microphone and was shouting things like, "Welcome to my house," and "Freedom ain't free, but this party sure was worth it." The irony was thick enough to choke on. Meanwhile, Carter filed the final paperwork in the background. Natalie had coordinated with a process server to be on standby. And Madison? She was ready with a camera crew just out of sight, sitting in a van with a local videographer. We weren't just taking the house back. We were turning the lights on in front of an audience. The next morning, Saturday, July 5th, I made my move. I arrived at the Lakehouse just after noon. I wore plain jeans, a dark t-shirt, and a windbreaker. Calm. Controlled. Brendan followed behind me with a drone rig tucked in a gym bag. Natalie stood off to the side, phone in hand. Carter's assistant trailed behind, carrying a clipboard with documents an inch thick. The place was still buzzing from the night before. Some people were passed out in lawn chairs. Others milled around the dock, drinking hard seltzers and tossing bean bags. Music thumped lazily from a speaker near the porch. And there was Chase, standing on the balcony, taking selfies. He didn't see me at first. Not until I stepped through the open gate and made my way up the porch. Then he froze. "Tyler," he said, blinking like I was a hallucination. "What are you doing here?" "Just came to check on my house," I said calmly. "Thought I'd drop in for the holiday." He laughed, but it was shaky. "You're trespassing, man. You need to leave." "I already told you." I raised a hand and snapped my fingers. Behind me, Natalie nodded to the process server, who stepped forward and handed Chase a thick envelope. "What's this?" Chase asked, his voice rising. "That," I said, "is a court order. Filed yesterday. Includes a motion to void the deed transfer due to forgery, illegal rental operations, zoning violations, and tax evasion. Effective immediately, the property is under legal dispute, and you're ordered to vacate until the case is resolved." He paled. "You're bluffing," he spat. "You can't just walk in here and take everything back." "Actually," said Carter's assistant, stepping forward, "we can. And we are. You'll have a chance to contest it in court. Assuming you don't end up charged first." "You set me up," Chase shouted. "No," I said quietly. "You set yourself up. I just hit record." That's when the drone lifted off. Brendan was filming. Madison's crew appeared from behind the parked van. Guests began murmuring, pulling out phones, whispering, backing away like they didn't want to get caught in whatever this was becoming. Sabrina stepped outside and shrieked, "Why are there cameras? What is this?" And I just smiled. Because for the first time in my life, Chase had nowhere to run. The moment the cameras came out, Chase tried to play it cool, but he was cracking around the edges. His fake tan did little to mask the beads of sweat breaking across his forehead, and the confident smirk he always wore in crisis began to twitch, unsure of where it belonged. Sabrina looked from him to the crowd forming in the yard, to the drone overhead buzzing like a mechanical hornet. She knew something was wrong, but not how wrong. Yet. "Stop filming," Chase barked. "This is private property. You're not allowed to film here." Madison, unfazed, replied calmly from behind the lens. "You invited half the county to a public event. You sold tickets online. This is newsworthy now. You can't just." "We have permission from the process server and the legal representatives to record on-site," she cut in. "And I have 3 different people on record stating you advertised the house as your own while forging documentation. But hey, feel free to keep talking." Chase looked around for allies, but all he found were confused guests backing away like someone had set a fire. Even the DJ turned the music down. People started muttering, filming with their phones. Some even laughed. Sabrina tried to interject, shrieking something about defamation and harassment, but her voice cracked with panic. I didn't say anything for a while. I just let it all unfold. Because this wasn't about shouting. This was about truth. And truth, when it finally shows up after being silenced for so long, doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand still and let the lies collapse around it. The process server handed over the last of the legal packets. "You have 72 hours to vacate," he said. "But the judge has issued a temporary restraining order from hosting any events or profiting from the property. All rental operations must cease immediately." "You don't even have proof," Chase yelled, his voice teetering on the edge of desperation. Carter's assistant calmly pulled out a USB stick and held it up. "Here's the signed witness statements, social media screenshots, forged notary documentation, and zoning complaints. This will be submitted to the court today. You're welcome to try and explain it under oath." Sabrina grabbed Chase's arm, nails digging into his skin. "You told me you own this place." I do," he hissed back. I signed the deed." "They signed it." You said his name wasn't even on the papers." He's lying. This is all fake. They're just jealous." But she'd already backed away. The cracks in their fake empire were spreading like lightning across glass. Natalie stepped forward with the final blow, a manila folder of printed messages from former guests and victims. One note was from a woman who booked the house for a honeymoon and got double booked, ending up sleeping in a car because Chase refused to refund her. Another was from a neighbor who called the fire marshal 3 times due to bonfires getting out of control. And then there was the letter from the notary public. Sworn testimony, notarized again, this time correctly, stating that she had never signed anything for Chase Weller. The document he'd submitted had used her old name and a fake stamp. Game. Over. Chase's shoulders slumped. For the first time in my life, I saw him small. Not angry. Not smug. Just small. Like the world had finally caught up to him. Sabrina stormed inside, grabbed a bag, and emerged moments later with her ridiculous purse dog clutched under one arm. She didn't even look at Chase as she marched past. Someone in the crowd said, "Guess freedom's not free after all," and the laughter that followed stung harder than anything I could have said. She drove off, and Chase just stood there. "You ruined me," he muttered, voice low. "No," I said softly. "You did that. I just showed everyone what was already there." The aftermath moved fast. The county seized all short-term rental activity on the Lakehouse within 48 hours. The HOA filed a formal complaint for violations, including noise, garbage, and unregistered commercial use. Chase tried to fight the lawsuit, but folded the moment Carter's team presented the forged deed and notary statements in court. The judge ruled that the original ownership remained in my name. Any secondary claims Chase made were voided due to fraud. He was banned from entering the property without written consent from me. I got the house back, but I didn't stop there. Chase was fined for zoning violations and forced to repay several of his fraudulent rental guests. Sabrina, facing the legal heat from her part in promoting the Airbnb scam, quietly ghosted him and filed for divorce 2 months later. Her dog's Instagram, yes, she had one, mysteriously disappeared. Madison's documentary dropped the following week. Titled The Lakehouse Lie, How One Man Stole His Parents' Retirement Home and Got Exposed. It racked up over 1 million views in 3 days. It was calm, professional, and devastating. Chase's face was blurred in most of the footage, but not all of it. The internet did its thing. He deleted his social media within a week. And me? I took my parents back to the Lakehouse. It was fall by then, the air crisp and clean, the trees bleeding gold and orange. We stood on the dock together, quiet, the way we always were. Dad didn't say much, but his hand on my shoulder said enough. Mom cried again, but this time, they were good tears. We sat on the porch that night, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars. No parties, no music, just peace. "I don't deserve all this," Mom said, sipping tea. "You didn't deserve what he did either," I replied. We let that hang in the air for a while. Then she smiled and asked if I wanted to help her restart her garden. We rebuilt. Slowly. Intentionally. The guest room became Dad's new study. Mom's knitting took over the sunroom. I visited every weekend. Sometimes I stayed over. Sometimes I just brought groceries and left flowers on the kitchen counter. The house felt warm again. Not because it was fancy, but because it finally felt ours. And Chase? Last I heard, he moved in with some friend in a basement apartment 2 towns over. Rumor was he tried to start a YouTube channel about real estate freedom, but the comment section wasn't kind. Every video he uploaded got swarmed with quotes from Madison's documentary. He disappeared from public life after that. And me? I didn't say a word. I just lived. Because the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's being everything they said you couldn't be, quietly, completely, and without looking back. And the last time I drove past the old mailbox and saw our family name shining in the sunlight, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because this time I didn't lose. And neither did they.